I'm recording my homily for the third Sunday of Easter, and tomorrow is the fourth Sunday of Easter. I really slipped up on this one. I was actually on vacation for 5 days, and I forgot to bring my camera, and so I never would have been able to put it on the internet anyways, but I wasn't able to get my homily done. But I figured I'll do a really short summary from last week, just for completion's sake. Last week, we heard in our archdiocese, the Archdiocese of Seattle, that we have a new archbishop that has been appointed to our diocese who will take over as soon as Archbishop Peter Sarton gives his formal word that he's retiring. And so I want to first of all, keep Archbishop Peter Sarton in our prayers. He's had a real rough go of it with his health, and he's had some surgeries, and he just feels like he has not had the stamina and the ability to keep going the way he feels like he should be able to. And so he requested that the Pope would find an archbishop who could take his place as he retires. So the archbishop who's been appointed is Archbishop Paul from Anchorage, and I'm going to keep mispronouncing his name, Achen, I think, Achen. Anyways, I don't know how to pronounce it, but Archbishop Paul from Anchorage is coming to Seattle, and so we'll keep him in our prayers. I think it's great for at least the meantime. We'll have 2 archbishops and 2 auxiliary bishops. We'll have 4 bishops, but the 2 archbishops are Peter and Paul. I mean, it doesn't get any better than that. Okay, we must be living in Rome then. Okay, because that's where St. Peter and Paul went, and we're both martyred. Okay, so beautiful gospel this last week. It's about Peter, right? And so this is after the resurrection. They've gone back to fishing, and they're kind of waiting. I guess they're not quite sure what to do, so they go back to fishing. They're up at the Sea of Galilee, and then they encounter Jesus again, and Jesus has this moment with Peter. 3 times he asks him, "Do you love me? Do you love me?" Right? So we know it's a beautiful question, but when you're asked it 3 times, it either implies that there's a sense of doubt in the answer. It's like a parent with a child is like, "Are you sure? Are you sure?" But with Jesus and Peter, I think it's different. It's not necessarily doubt, but Jesus wants Peter to understand that his answer must be real. He can't be like before, where he just, at the drop of a hat, he denies Jesus. It has to be real. And you know with Peter, you know it's becoming very real for him. He's maturing spiritually. He's maturing to become, if you would call him our Holy Father, our first Holy Father, the Bishop of Rome. But he's maturing into that role, knowing that he must be willing to give his life, which is exactly what the gospel says at the very end. He says, when you're older, they will lead you to places where you do not want to go, in reference to the manner in which he would give his life, right? Okay, so I'm going to talk a little bit about that kind of 3-dimensional answer to Jesus when he comes to us and says, "Do you love me?" This is not just love like, "Hey, do you love me? Great. Okay, now let's go get dinner." This is, do you love me enough so that I can give you everything? I can give you the mission. Okay, so, the first time I was ever asked that question, the first time that I can remember that I was ever asked the question, "Do you love Jesus?" was in the seminary. And I think that's sad. It's sad, so we had our first communion, one of our first communion masses last Saturday, and we had 13 kids. Our groups are split up, so we don't do them all at once, but we had 13 kids. And I asked them during my homily, I went up to them, I said, "Okay, you took 8 exams." See, the thing with our kids in our curriculum, the kids and their parents, they have to take 8 oral exams through the course of the year. I think it's awesome. The kids did great. But I told them in my homily, I said, there's a 9th, and it's one question. And so I walked right up to the kids and I said, "Do you love Jesus? Do you love Jesus?" Because I don't want them to look back on their life and say, "How come nobody ever asked me that question?" Now, will they remember that I asked them the question? I don't know. Were they ready to hear the question? I don't know. But I want them to hear the question. I want them to ponder it. I want them to think about it. I want them to internalize it. Do you love Jesus? I say, well, yeah. No. Do you really love him? Are you willing to feed his lambs, right? Are you willing to tend his sheep? Okay. I was in the seminary. I was in the lunchroom, and one of my teachers was sitting across the table from me. And we were just having a normal conversation. And at one point he said, do you love Jesus? And I never forgot that. You know, everybody will tell you Jesus loves you. That's great. But do you love him? Because that's the question that Jesus is asking Peter. Do you love him enough to accept whatever mission he would give you? Do you love him enough to believe everything that he taught? Do you love him enough to trust you with your future, with everything he wants to entrust to you? Do you love him enough to suffer anything that you might need to suffer in following him? Speaking of tests, the week before Easter, or the week of Easter also, we had our confirmation kids. So our confirmation kids, as well as we had about 25 adults who were being confirmed, I gave them a final oral exam, and I had some parishioners help me to administer it, so I didn't do all of them. But the ones I did do, I would ask questions, and there was this one section where it was true and false. So it's an oral, so I'm talking to one student one-on-one, right? And this one section was true and false, and the questions were actually pretty easy. But I asked a question. So for example, I think the very first question was, did God create everything? Did God create everything? I think that question is very important, right? Because as soon as you realize God created everything, it puts everything in the context about how we live our lives, right? So, do you believe did God create everything? And they would say, true. And I would say, are you sure? Now, when I said that question in my homily at Mass, everybody was like, oh yeah, sure. Yeah, it's true. But you have a teenager sitting face to face, and you say to him, are you sure? The response is very different. And some of them, they were like, I mean false. Because by asking the question, they thought I was implying that they were wrong. But it was not implying that they were wrong. I didn't want them to doubt themselves. I wanted to have confidence in their answer. I wanted them to know the answer and to believe it, so that when they go out into the world and somebody says something contrary to the faith, they're not going to immediately buckle under it, right? That's pre-resurrection Peter, pre-Pentecost Peter. We want to be post-Pentecost, post-resurrection, where when Jesus says, do you love me? You say, yes, I do. To have confidence. When somebody comes up to us and says, you're Catholic? Do you really believe what the Catholic Church believes? I mean, come on. We're in the 21st century. Do you really believe? Yeah, I really do. And then you can have a beautiful conversation. Because it's not an adversarial topic of talking about religion. Somebody's asking, what do you believe? I say, yes, I really do believe it. And so have confidence in that answer. So Jesus and Peter, one of the things that Jesus is doing with Peter is he's leading him, he's building confidence. He's building confidence in that answer. So that when somebody challenges him, he can say, yes, I do believe. And I know what it's like to not believe because I denied him. But I do believe, right? When I was in the seminary, it was really awesome. We had lots of really, really great guys studying to be priests. I mean, really great guys. And to see them, to study with them, to pray with them was really nice. But even there were a couple bad apples. And, you know, I hope I'm not scandalizing anybody by saying that, but there were a couple bad apples, but some were such that they would act holy. So in the chapel, when we were praying, in class, when they're giving their answers sounded very pious, very holy. But then you talk to them on the other side, right? When no teachers were watching, when none of the formation advisors were watching, when they were just letting their hair down and just being themselves, you realized, wow, they were completely the opposite. And I never really thanked one of them, because the gift that they gave me was they gave me an understanding of how absolutely dreadfully ugly it is to see someone who deep down really actually doesn't believe, but acts like they do, to see how destructive that will be and how ugly it is. It makes you almost physically sick when you see someone who's acting like they would say yes to Jesus, but then deep down, they're actually saying no. It's false. It's a lie. Hence, once again, Jesus staring into the eyes of Peter and saying, "Do you truly love me?" I'll leave us with that question, all right? So tomorrow, the fourth Sunday of Easter, is also Mother's Day. And so as I do that homily, I'm going to go visiting my mom. I just want to say Happy Mother's Day to all moms. And we also have Good Shepherd Sunday, so I'll be talking a little bit about that. All right, God bless. Bye.